Today I'm working on my CL72 Fender. This is an aluminum Fender that I recently picked up, and I'm going to strip it down, paint prep it, and paint it with this Honda Power Equipment touch-up paint that Bill Silva recommended to me. And I'm stripping it down with this clean stripper, which seems to be working pretty well. I've got about 40 minutes into this, about halfway done with the rough work. A couple of problems I've noticed here is there's some cracking, some stress fractures coming off of one of the mount holes. So I'm going to drill holes, stop holes, where those little red Sharpie marks are. Now this Fender comes off of this bike. It's a 65 CL72, and the fenders that I had originally on this bike were bobbed by a previous owner. So I got a set of intact aluminum fenders. The paint was pretty bad on them, so I'm just trying to make them look good here. So I'm going to continue on with this, strip it down more, sand it, get that work done, and I'll show you what that looks like. So these cracks have been stop drilled, and this should prevent them from getting any bigger. So the next step would be to get the fractures welded up to stabilize them, and then after that, sanding and maybe a little body filler to smooth out any imperfections in the surface, so I can paint it and it'll look good. So I now have the rear tail light off, and I'm going to polish this up, clean it up, spray the base here, the black, and get that ready for remounting to the fender when the fender's done. In taking off the taillight and cleaning it up, I noticed some more stress fractures where the taillight mounts. You can see one here going down to there, and then one here going down to there. So those will I'll have to do about 4 drill stops to keep those from growing anymore. And then there's 2 non-factory drill holes where somebody mounted maybe a different light, and it had a slightly different distance between the bolts. I don't know if I'll be able to fill those in with aluminum or not. Also on the back side, there's some problems with this metal bracket. It's got a stress fracture here all the way through, and because of that, these 2 rivets are loose. So there's going to have to be some welding done there. But all in all, it's actually in pretty good shape. And we're going to go ahead and continue work. So there we are. We've got 4 nice little stop holes drilled so that these fractures don't propagate. I think next I'm going to see if I can't persuade these lips here to fall back down to where they should be with some metalworking hammers. Well, these cracks are a lot more flush than they were. This one seems to flex quite a bit. I can move it flush with my fingers, but it just is kind of flexing back and forth. And this one, I'm afraid that since it's cracked here to here, if I mess with it anymore, I could risk breaking it right off. So I think that it's time to stop hammering on this. I've gotten it as far as I can with gentle taps, and got to stabilize those fractures with some welds. And then I can grind it down, and it might need a little bit of filler. Also, in the hammering process, I used a lead shot bag and a 2x4 to brace it, so that it had some support behind it, so that I wasn't denting, putting a large depression in the fender or changing its shape. I simply put the bag on top of the 2x4 and put the fender on top of that. Now it's time to get back to stripping the paint. So you can see in just a few minutes, this whole area has been stripped down to almost bare aluminum. There's a little bit of work I've got to do here on some of the tougher spots, but the stripper works pretty well. What I do is I spray it on, and then I tip it out with a brush so it's still thick, because it needs to be thick. You can't spread it too thin, and it really doesn't do much if it's too thin. And then I'll work the brush into the paint, which kind of turns to a gel, and once it gets thick I put some more stripper on, and that seems to work its way through the layers fairly quickly, and it does a pretty good job. So you can see, using the paintbrush to get a nice thick layer of the stripper on there, and then you can come through with it and mechanically just remove all that paint that is now like a gel. And once you're not making progress with the brush, that means it's time to throw some more stripper on it. So I've gone from here to here in about 10 minutes. I think that's pretty good progress. The next step would be to, once I get 90% of the paint or 95% of the paint off, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some sandpaper to do the final cleanup.